discussion, leading off with the Conservation Commission. So do we have someone representing the Conservation Commission, Mark?
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and promote Shep, and just for everyone following along, that's going to be tab 6, page 9 in your budget books.
Well, that's weird.
Just trying to find Shep.
Well, you could experiment with that. I think Elias tried that.
Okay, Shep, you're good to go.
But Erica came up with a app where you could record internally. I haven't downloaded that yet, but anyway. Okay.
Shep, you just have to open your mic on your end.
Okay. That's right.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay.
Shep, do you want to start us off?
Sure. This is a sort of a replication with nothing more than excuse me, the cat just bit me. Nothing more than the I get what is the sort of standard increase in compensation. Everything else is flat budgeted pretty much, except for land maintenance and trails in McAllister was $5,000 in fiscal 22, and it looks like the town manager is recommending a reduction to $4,000. Everything else is flat.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the Select Board or Finance Committee?
One question here, Shep. My assumption is that you are also the animal control officer. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I am. That's correct.
Just maybe just a sentence or two on how you allocate your time between the two.
Well, the animal control officer position, which technically is an affiliate of the police department, if you will, although it doesn't show up in their, I don't think it shows up in their budget, but in any event, it's separate, I think. But it is the training for it and the work that is involved on a day-to-day basis is related more to the police department than anywhere else. But what I do is I operate as sort of the enforcer of the licensing requirement for dogs, principally. It's actually technically dogs, cats, and ferrets, but we don't have many ferrets and very few cats get licensed. And so it's basically a dog job. And when people who are known to have dogs don't relicense them, then I am advised by the town clerk's office, and I sort of go into enforcement mode, and we do what we can to collect. And if people still decline to license their dogs, and inevitably we end up at the local courthouse, and they can explain to the bailiff or the magistrate. Yeah, right. They can explain why they don't care to license their dog, but generally we don't get there. It's usually seldom more than a half a dozen people in the end, but we could have as many as 100 and some that I start chasing for their licensing as animal control. But it's technically a 24/7 position. If the police call and say, come get a dog that somebody brought to us, I have to go do that. But they're nice enough not to call me in the middle of the night. At least they haven't yet. And I do what I can to go accommodate them and take the dog off their hands. And we have an arrangement with a kennel in Egremont where we take the dogs. And the truth be known that with the advent of Facebook and public communications now on all subjects. They have a Facebook page at the police department, and when someone brings them a dog, they, like us not, will take a photograph and put it up on the Facebook page. And my experience is that about 95% of the time, the owner will show up at the police station to collect the animal within half an hour, 45 minutes. I mean, it's pretty quick. Apparently a lot of people monitor that sort of thing. But so it's a catch as catch can, respond as needed kind of a thing, plus administrative enforcement of the licensing business.
Thank you, Shep. Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Shep Evans. We'll move on to the planning board unless anyone else has any questions on either board. So now we're going to go to the planning board on page 10, chapter 6. Do we have someone to represent this budget or to speak to this budget?
Hi, Chris Rembold here. I'm happy to speak to this.
Hey, Chris.
Hi. This is a pretty basic budget. The bulk of the planning board's budget goes towards their recording secretary, the board clerk, miscellaneous amount for training. Sometimes we have updates to the subdivision control law. Recently, these things have been webinars. We still have to pay a small fee oftentimes. So that covers the training for the board members, office supplies, some ink for the printer and some legal pads. Those of you who may be acquainted with the planning board's minutes, they are the most detailed and useful minutes of any board I have ever read. And they run to pages and pages and pages. And so Kim does need a few legal pads sometimes. There is a small increase proposed in the board clerk just to bring that hourly rate up a little bit towards $20 an hour. Given the fact that there's at least 2 meetings a month, sometimes joint meetings between several boards, and the recording secretary covers those. And just for the simple fact that the work is excellent. I can go back 20-25 years and know exactly what the planning board talked about then and why, and I can't tell you how helpful that is. So anyway, that's the only change there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any questions? Okay, super. Moving on. I believe that we have Steve Bannon in the house. I don't know if
We do. I'm sorry for being late.
I shall hand it over to you, Steve. We're just about to start zoning Board of Appeals.
Excuse me.
Okay, Michelle, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a question. I'm having trouble with the screen share of my Zoom tonight for some reason. Going back to the planning board budget, please.
Yes.
Go back.
Please go back, please, Chris. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you. With regard to any trigger as far as, I know when we were discussing select board and there could be facets to the select board salary that doesn't apply to a clerical salary for a board. Is there any trigger as far as we raise the salary? Does it kick into retirement? I know it wouldn't kick into benefits. I'm just curious, that's all. Anyone
Chris?
answer that?
Chris or Mark?
I'm not sure I understand. This is a part-time position. I think there's maybe, I want to say 260 hours a year, maybe 250 a year at the most. I don't think that's, if there are any triggers, that's not nearly approaching.
Okay, I was just.
Is that the question, or?
Yeah, well, I was just recalling when we were increasing the salary of the select board per member, that there was a threshold that could activate that the person would be the retirement benefit eligible. That's all. And it probably does not apply to this type of position.
I don't think it does. I can't answer that question.
Okay.
Mark or Sue?
that would not apply here. I think what you're talking about, Michelle, is, I believe, and Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, but is $5,000 the threshold where technically someone becomes an employee of the town, and that's why we were trying to stay below that with select board members? In this case, this individual serving as board clerk is already beyond the $5,000 threshold, and they're not eligible for benefits and would not be a member of the Berkshire Retirement Board. So.
Okay.
I think the select board are only eligible because the town voted that they be eligible. Is that right?
Okay. And they're elected officials, which is different than your board clerk too.
Okay.
So there's different rules for each.
Mhm.
Thanks, Sue.
Anyone else on, before we move back to, or go to the zoning board of appeals? Okay, we can switch to the next page.
The zoning board of appeals, this is, there's really no change here from last year's approved budget. You know, it's not often that we spend out the entire board clerk line. The zoning board of appeals, as you may know, just meets on an as needed basis. If there's a particularly contentious issue, they may have a lot of meetings. Last year they didn't have many meetings at all. And actually, many of those were joint meetings with the select board and executive sessions. So the select board clerk took those minutes. So we didn't see much in the way of expenses last year. This is pretty bare bones. The same basic training lines as I explained for the planning board. The zoning board also has to keep up with current best practices and laws, basic office supplies, subscriptions to zoning practice or other newsletters that are relevant to ZBAs across the state.
Any questions? Pretty straightforward. Next, page 12, tab 6 is planning community development. First, I believe that's yours.
Yes, of course. So the change here, you'll see there is a change primarily in the salary line. That's the assistant town manager, planning, community development director. There was a mid-year adjustment to that line. Previous years, it was covered when this position was promoted to the assistant town manager level. It was covered through various budgets. I think that was also a mid-year adjustment. And so I think now there's not a major increase proposed. It's just the 2%. I think now you're just finally seeing it all in one line. But I'm happy to answer any questions about that. The affordable housing stipend, which is the second line there, that does not go to me. Currently, it goes to Shep Evans. He staffs the Affordable Housing Trust, taking minutes, making agendas, and helping them out administratively. So that's a stipend that goes to another individual for the Housing Trust Fund purposes. The office supplies, pretty basic there. Contracted services for Berkshire Regional Planning Commission for 2000. That's something that we typically use to support BRPC's regional brownfield work. While we sometimes as a town get grants directly from US EPA or Mass Development, more often than not, those grants are regional grants and we benefit from them. Phase 1 studies, phase 2 studies done on properties in town, either for the town or for other private properties. So this helps with the administration of those programs because typically EPA grants don't allow for general program administration. So they rely on the communities to help with that. So that's what that $2,000 is. The economic development line, that is used not only to pay for Berkshire Regional Planning shared economic planner support, it's used for anything that may be related to economic development. So last year, a lot of that work was focused on the downtown local rapid recovery program, the cultural districts activities, and things like that. Happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Seeing none, we will move on to page 13, buildings and grounds.
Just gonna look to promote Sean. Sorry, there's always a delay in between.
No problem.
There you go. Sean, you're good to go.
So, Sean Van Dusen, Public Works Superintendent. So there's a couple items that I can call out here. I think the first item would be the increase in the number of staff for labor and operators in the Buildings and Ground Division. There's been a request made to have another staffer, primarily to deal with the increased maintenance for the landscaping downtown. When I first started 5 years ago, we had quotes to maintain the landscaping downtown on the planners for about $15,000. The number for that has increased to between $40,000 and $45,000 annually, and that doesn't include a number of other parks and gardens around downtown, and Housatonic, some other ones that probably should be called out are the Veterans Memorials. So we have been unable to afford to landscape a great deal of town. This position, the idea for it would be to hire someone to, specifically in the summertime, weed and maintain the gardens, with the idea that we'd actually probably save money in terms of their overall salary, because to landscape all of downtown and the parks would probably be over $100,000. So that's the brief idea, that we would be able to utilize that staffer in the wintertime to plow, and as well as to do building maintenance, and maybe even fill in part-time at the transfer station and clean the Uzi Dome, which is seeing increased usage.
If I could just add,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one point to your comments, Sean, and that's that this position as proposed this year would start halfway through the fiscal year, so January 1st of 2023. So it's not a full year position. And I guess the last point I wanted to make is that particularly in the position that I'm in, I hear a great deal of criticism from residents about how we care and maintain our gardens and memorials in town. So this is one solution that we're presenting tonight to address that.
I think there's also hope that the individual will be able to help out mowing. We currently have about 2 weeks of mowing to get done in 1 week, and it's constant that we don't get the mowing done in the manner that a lot of people would like to have happen, particularly in some cemeteries and parks. And so hopefully the position would help alleviate some of the strain put on staff. And for a retrospect, when I was working here in 1998, there were 3 summer staffers that exclusively mowed the parks and cemeteries. That was all they did. Those positions have been eliminated. So we are mowing a bit more than before, even, and with less staff than we had prior. I can move along. Go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead and finish, and then we'll take questions.
Okay. So this was a tough budget to go through for a variety of reasons for me. Everyone's certainly aware of the issues of inflation and energy costs. So that's exacerbated with costs in labor and materials, which have skyrocketed over the last year. Starting out, electricity. I believe this is used for streetlights primarily. We're asking for an increase to cover what probable increase in costs we're going to be seeing. This line specifically, if it does go over, hits the rest of the budget pretty hard, and that has happened before, where we had to buffer an overage with other lines, which is difficult to do. So that's the first increase. The next increase we're asking for in the gas and oil line, to cover the increase in fuel oil. That that gas and oil line is primarily used for heating in the buildings. The next increase we're asking for is the water and sewer, primarily to deal with the increased sewer rates that the town voted in last fiscal year. As any department, they still are required to pay the fees of the sewer, even though it's back to the town itself. Building and grounds repairs, we're asking for an increase there. Some of that will be due to try to fix some of the cemetery stones that are we haven't been able to catch up on. Other issues that have arisen in the last 2 years have been smaller projects that don't hit the threshold for capital of 10 grand, but they still are expensive. $6,000-7,000 repairs for bathrooms at the police station, for instance, is similar at the senior center. These repairs, multiple repairs in multiple buildings, add up to a pretty sizable number, and we haven't been able to react to them in the manner that I think we should. For instance, the tarping of the Houstonic School is one of those instances where we didn't have money in the operating budget to be able to put a tarp on a roof. We have a leak in another roof that I don't know that I'll be able to fix the way I wish I could, because we just don't have enough flexibility within the operating budget to do that. That also applies to contracted services, and these lines are closely connected. They could probably be one line, but similar things to contracted services, hiring someone to come and work on an elevator or an electrical issue has become increasingly more expensive and difficult. The contractors we hire are specialized. Some of them come from as far away as Boston to work on the equipment, HVAC. There's several $100s an hour. These repair people, they're working on complex computer systems in the HVAC and in other areas. And as I said, they're very specialized. So their rates have gone up, as has the building material. So that's one of the reasons we're asking for an increase in that line. Trash removal, another increase, and that's just the nature of the way things are going. It's a small increase, but it is an increase we're going to see. Parks and cemetery supplies. This line is generally used to purchase things like weed whackers, push mowers, and just basic repairs and replacement of small machines. Those prices have also gone up. Custodial supplies. The staff is using a great deal more chemicals and cleaning products as a result of COVID than we have in prior years. Should we have another outbreak or spike in cases, it's reflected in this, and hopefully we'll have the ability to pivot to purchase those supplies. I think during COVID, a lot of the stuff was purchased under grant funding, and it did hit our operating budget. We also had to purchase a lot of plastic barriers and things in various buildings to stop people from, or to put a barrier between people when they spoke, and those were incredibly expensive. So those are I think the majority of the increases in buildings and grounds.
Okay, let's start with Tom Lavo.
Thank you, Steve. Hey, Sean. Good evening.
Hi, Tom.
With the add to staff, do you still forecast the need for such a dramatic increase in the overtime line?
Hopefully not, but the overtime, I should have mentioned the overtime. I increased that specifically for one reason, and that is for parks garbage removal. We have had our parks inundated in a manner that I think is pretty unprecedented, and as a result, we need to pick up garbage more often on weekends, and even during the week after hours. I anticipate should the parks get less usage, that wouldn't be such an issue, but I think that the overtime line probably will actually need to stay. I think that hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. No, thank you.
Ann O'Dwyer.
Thanks, and thanks, Sean. And I guess I just wasn't clear on this new line when it goes from 4 to 4.5. Is that because it's a part-time, half-time line or position, or it's because it's starting halfway through the year?
It would be starting halfway through the year.
So eventually it'll be a 5 there.
Correct.
Okay.
So just for background, I'm sorry to interrupt. We have a contract with an existing contractor to maintain the planters downtown, to landscape them through next year. That would cover a significant portion of the work this individual would be doing. So we wouldn't need to fund it until January.
Okay, and then, but this is a year-round position, right? It's not just a summer parks and planters position, right?
Correct.
And so they would help with plowing in the winter, but the the planters and the parks in the summer. I think, I'm sorry if I missed it. Did you say where the gardens and the parks were?
Sure. So the position primarily, just so I don't get too lost in the weeds, would be to landscape. It would be to maintain the planters downtown, but we have landscaping that should be done at Town Hall, around the Town Hall building, around the gazebo, the War Memorial out front here. As part of that, there's the landscaping in front of Town Hall as well. There's the Newsboy statue that hasn't been touched. There's landscaping that should be done at the Senior Center, both libraries, the courthouse. There's another monument, Housatonic. We have in front of the Hoosier Dome. There's also landscaping in the commons in front of the Housatonic School. That amount of landscaping alone would certainly keep an individual busy 40 hours a week.
And it is your sense that you could use the extra help year round in other capacities too?
Right. So my thought for the position would be able to have this person hopefully maintain the gardens, and let's just say it's a rainy day, they could move and do some equipment maintenance or help out one of the buildings. Or I could move them around. Let's say if there was a need to have someone work at the transfer station or help out cleaning the Hoosier Dome. We are definitely short-staffed in that department, and you can even look through the master plan and see that this has been an ongoing issue for a long time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Garfield.
Yes, thank you. I was wondering, Sean, if some of this could be done, the landscaping should be farmed out through the horticultural program, through the schools, maybe save some money on that, and the person maybe maintain, the person you're speaking of, do other jobs or maybe winter things, but we must have a horticultural program, and I'm sure there's some young folks that would be happy to do that. I was wondering if that's possible. And the other thing is that maybe far-fetched, but I know sometimes you'll see and where they'll have prisoners doing cleanup, etc. I'm just wondering if more so students could do something like that.
So to both points, we currently have a request in with the district courthouse to utilize the inmates in anytime they're available. It'd likely be to come in and clean up garbage around the roads, but because of COVID, they've been unavailable. We also do utilize the horticultural program at the high school already in some projects. Like they helped with the rolling planters we had on Railroad Street summer. They helped plant those. But a project this size and with this much work, I don't believe that volunteers or the horticultural program would really be able to take on all that responsibility. We certainly would still look to them and volunteers around town to help, and we'd still need it. But I don't know if it would be able to. They would be able to take on this size project.
Right, thank you.
Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just a question about the courthouse maintenance. I mean, that is a district court. So, do you ask the other towns who use that courthouse to chip in on that maintenance bill at all?
So the courthouse is our building, and they rent to us. They pay us rent, and we have I believe a lease agreement that requires us to take care of stuff in this manner. So we don't get involved in the money that would be raised by the courthouse for charging our towns or anything like that. It's simply a contract between us and the court or the municipality. I do believe that the contract for that is up soon. I think Mark will be negotiating a new lease. I think it's a 10-year lease we have, I believe.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add in, not that anyone spoke against it, so I won't go long. I think the new position is needed. I, for one, complain to Mark often about the appearance of, especially the War Memorial, the Mason Library, Ramsdale. I realize it seems maybe a little excessive, but if we're going to have these beautiful buildings and grounds that aren't maintained, it seems to me it's embarrassing for the residents and for visitors alike. And our staff just doesn't have time to do it. It's no one's fault. And I know the cemeteries and the ball fields don't always get mowed in a timely fashion. If we have 3 or 4 days of rain, it just throws everything off. So I think it's a really good idea to finally step up and do this. I'm glad it was proposed.
This is a complex idea, but has the town ever considered some type of additional fundraising from town merchants and commercial tenants in the town to provide additional funds for the landscaping, particularly around the downtown area?
So I can answer that, Phil. We've tried twice to form a bid district downtown and failed miserably. And therefore, if it's going to get done, it's going to be done through town money. It's a complex idea. It's not a crazy idea, but the merchants have not gone along with that. So,
okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Moving ahead, highway, page 19.
Thank you.
So I realize I misspoke when I said the streetlights were covered on the electricity for the buildings. They're clearly right here. The other line was for power for the buildings. So apologies. You can see the first increase is for streetlights, and I referenced before the increase in utility costs and other issues. So that is why there's an increase in streetlights. Sewer and water. I mentioned prior that we increased our sewer rates, I think by 15% last year, maybe a little more. So we'll be anticipating an increase in this cost for sewer. Equipment maintenance and repairs. This is the cost to work on the trucks, the backhoe, the loader. We are seeing increased costs related to those. We have computer systems now in most of them that require us to purchase new equipment to do diagnostic testing on them. And when we're unable to do that, those pieces of machinery have to be shipped off to the Leominster area or Worcester area, or we have to pay someone to come and work on them here. And they are incredibly expensive, more than a lawyer. So we're seeing drastic increases in those costs, and this is an attempt to try to deal with them, even though we do have a great fleet and we are appreciative of it. To keep things running in the middle of winter like this, where the breakdown happens is very costly. For instance, we just had we're gonna have a repair to the front end of one of our trucks that'll likely run over $10,000. It's a repair we have to have done immediately. So the budget gets eaten through very quickly when you have those kind of costs. Street maintenance and repairs, that's the next number you'll see called out. And I want to refer everyone to the $90,000 spent in FY21. The majority of that $90,000 was spent in the first 3 months of FY21 from July through September. And I had to freeze the pothole patching last spring because I was fearful that we were going to blow the budget apart. Not only because there were so many potholes to fill, but because the asphalt prices have almost doubled in 5 years. So I've asked for an increase in the street maintenance repairs, and that is being driven primarily by asphalt patching, which is very, very critical, especially in the springtime after we've had a hard winter. And anyone that had driven any of Route 71 last year during the spring would know what it is when we are unable to patch. Contracted services is the next increase we're asking for. That is related to the labor and material costs for a variety of our vendors, including people that come and fix the street lights. They're incredibly expensive. And the flashing lights in town, they come from, I believe, the Northampton area to work on that, and they are here constantly, especially if you've ever driven on Bridge Street and seen a malfunction. We have trouble there often, and unfortunately, it's very expensive to fix. Trash hauling, recycling, we've asked for a modest, actually it looks like we were actually the same. I'll take that back. We're asking for an increase in the tree service line. Last year we went over the budget by $15,000. This line is mostly to deal with hazardous trees. So they're trees that are normally posing a threat to property or to individuals. I had to freeze the tree removal line last spring as well because we've blown it apart, and unfortunately that means having to weigh the risk of what trees need to come down absolutely and what ones we can wait until a few months to take down. I prefer not to have that anxiety. So we're asking for an increase of $10,000 in hopes that we can continue to deal with those hazard trees and hopefully stay under budget. You can see we asked for an increase in gas and diesel. That's reflected because of the substantial increase in the cost of fuel over the last year. Public works supplies, I asked for an increase. Looks like Mark shot it back down. That's okay. I think the snow and ice supplies, we also asked for an increase. The price of salt went from $70 a ton to $95 a ton this year. That's a massive increase, and I know that once you increase that line for snow and ice, it can't go back down legally, but I don't think you're going to see $130,000 ever again for the cost of salt. So it's a small increase. I think that's the majority of the increases. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Any questions? Ann, go ahead.
Yeah, Sean, I'm sorry. You were saying there was an increase in snow and ice?
Yeah, it's small, to 150 grand from 133 or 17,000, so not small. But the cost of salt that we went out to bid for has gone up from like $70 a ton or 75 to $95 a ton. It's incredibly expensive now, and it's a massive increase in the cost of salt.
Okay, thank you.
Phil, go ahead.
Yes, Sean, are you able to track the fee revenue that this department takes in with respect to the stickers for the transfer station and I guess that's primarily the fees you charge residents at the transfer station, just to know how much of those costs are offset by those modest fees.
So I don't have that in front of me, but I can tell you it would take a massive loss. And we are going to be, I just spoke with Mark earlier today about we have a proposal from an engineering firm to do a full analysis of the transfer station, the fees, the comparison to other towns, and also incorporating the capital costs long-term into the new fee schedule that we'd probably be proposing, and then be incorporating that into we have a new kiosk that I need to get installed up there to try to streamline the way we sell the dump stickers. But the short answer is, bring on. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I do believe they're minor in terms of what we take in.
Okay, well, just anecdotally, I know I'm sure it's a sensitive topic, but my understanding is a lot of the private haulers are going to be increasing their fees to offset their expenses lately.
Oh, yes.
As the cost, wherever they take their garbage, the cost is going up. So, obviously we need to try to sort of stay in balance there a bit. And quickly on the tree service, can you just clarify what that? I presume that's for trees on town-owned property.
Correct.
Only, right?
Correct. And we do use some of this money to plant new trees, but the bulk of it, the lion's share, goes to removing hazardous trees that are a threat to property and for people's lives. We get calls all the time, and the tree warden goes out and does an excellent job figuring out if they are a hazard and then taking appropriate actions. A lot of times they're trees being removed with a crane, and they're complicated removals, and they're very, very costly.
And I'm sorry, one more. How have you been able to avoid the relatively expensive police details on some of the work you've done?
We do pay the police.
Okay, oftentimes, this is Chris. Oftentimes, those costs are built into the contract for the construction work.
All right. So the police detail line, which is you're budgeting at 7,500, it seems to be coming in reliably at zero. Am I reading that right?
So I believe that was the first year for that line last year. I could be wrong. Maybe Sue remembers. And I think that we actually have incurred costs, but the budget hasn't been updated because I have been without an office manager for 3 months. So I do believe there are some costs incurred there.
Yeah, that was a new line item for fiscal 22. We decided to break that out so that it was transparent. So Sean's right. That's why there's no costs on year end of fiscal 21.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Please go right ahead.
Hi, thank you, Sean. So I noticed there's $101,000 difference between what you had requested and what Mark ended up recommending. So I'm just wondering about the impact, having this come back with that difference. Or is there anything that we should be concerned about, or was that surprise to you? Or I just, it seems like a substantial difference. I just want you to speak.
I think that so obviously the budget I propose is the one that I hoped I have. And this happened last year too, if you recall, the same thing, and we were able to work through it. Obviously there's got to be, I met with Sue and Mark to go over everything, and they went through actuals with me, and we debated and discussed where there could be cuts made and where they're that my idea of the expenditures might not have been exactly what the last year's were. So I think this is a reasonable budget, and otherwise I wouldn't have signed it. So I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
anyone else? Seeing no one, Sean, I just want to say thank you, because this year is a very tough one for you, because as we all know, if we buy anything for our house or our car, everything's going up in price, and without any increase in services. So it's a good budget, in my estimation. Next would be Council of Aging, page 22.
Okay, Polly, you're good to go.
Okay, hi, Polly Mann, Accounts Director of COA. So my budget, I have a couple of increases, but mostly everything's remained the same. You can see up in the salary line, there is an increase. There is also a slight increase to the coordinator position in transportation. And the rest of them there's a couple of decreases. So it looks like it's a pretty straight and even budget. So if anybody has any questions about it, I can go through it line by line if you prefer.
No, let's look for questions, Paula.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Steve. Hi, Polly. This is a question maybe for Mark. The custodian is not a DPW employee. It's like,
he does work. He's kind of shared. I'm sorry, Tom. He does work at the transfer station, so I'm not sure where that fits in. I don't know.
Okay, I just assumed that DPW would take care of the custodial duties at the Council on Aging building.
Did maybe 8-9 years ago that was the case, and that didn't seem to be working out well. So he came in and he's working again at the transfer station part-time and at the COA.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Ian, go right ahead.
Hi, thanks. I'm just trying to remember the transportation. That's something that's changed quite considerably over the past couple of years, correct? Isn't it now that where the town is overseeing that? And it looks like you're finding it's costing even less than we might have anticipated for 2020, 21, and 22. That it's actually you're coming down in that budget line.
Well, the first year, it's a program. We don't know what we're going to be anticipating. We don't know the costs coming up. And we've had a year now, a little over a year to really get a sense of what we're expecting. It's going to continue over several years to really get a good final number on how this is going to work. But we're pleasantly surprised at how it's working out. And I do have some grant funding that compromise we can put together with the budget, and that's helping considerably. So yes, very pleased with that.
Great.
Sue, go ahead.
Thank you, Steve. And to follow up on that, if you recall, we also established a revolving fund for the transportation program. So a lot of the costs are running through that, as well as Polly has grant assistance money. So we've been tracking, we just recently put together like a spreadsheet of analyzing all the revenue sources and all the expenses. So right now we still need the money in the budget to help offset the program, but hopeful that somewhere down the line we'll be self-supporting.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Moving ahead to libraries on page 24 of tab 6.
Okay, Amanda, you're good to go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Amanda DeGeorgis, the Library Director for Mason and Ramsdale Libraries. You can see before you the library budget for FY23. The salary increases for the assistant librarians and library clerks are all determined by the union contract, so that is a 2% increase for all of them. Longevity pay remains the same as this year. For the actual supplies and operating budget, there are no real increases. There's a little bit of shifting some funds around to increase the print budget, but I also decreased the travel and training budget, as I have found more and more of our trainings are online and free, which is fabulous. I am happy to answer any questions about it, if there are any.
Questions, please.
Just a quick comment. Partly with my other hat on, the Friends of the Great Barrington Libraries supplements the library budget by $6,000 to $8,000 every year. So that's not in here. We pay for programming and things like that. So there's an extra little bump, and they do great work. That is all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Go ahead, Phil.
Are you? Maybe this is really beyond the scope of this meeting here, but do you track, and how well do you track the utilization of the various resources at the two libraries, and and sort of track the changes based upon COVID and other factors and people working from home? Are you tracking that and trying to make certain modifications to the services that you provide and how you're staffing libraries? And again, if this is beyond the scope of this conversation, we could table it then.
We do keep statistics on circulation, on usage of library resources, people who come through the doors, people who phone calls, for reference requests. We keep track of everything that goes in and out of our doors, be it books, DVDs, magazines, computers, hotspots, the library of things. And we also are monitoring digital resources, ebooks. We're branching into e-videos, streaming services. So those are monitored monthly. They're reported to the Board of Trustees every month. And then I also have to do a yearly report with the state of Massachusetts that goes through all of those statistics.
Okay.
And obviously, as trends are discovered, we look at where we need to be investing our resources. Like right now, we are heavily investing in digital resources, as that is what people are currently demanding.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Parks and Recreation, page 25.
So I'm back. So the first line that you'll see called out for an increase is I think the only line, forgive me, wrong, my eyes are a little blurry, is the youth program management increase. That's the money we utilize for the Rail Street Youth Project in Berkshire South to oversee the programming all summer at the Housatonic Playground, at the lake, lifeguards, as well as the skate park. We're anticipating going out to bid for that again this year, and I believe there's been an increase in minimum wage. I also think there's an issue getting staff, which might drive the cost up a little bit in terms of hourly wage. So I put a buffer in there, factoring that in, and also hoping that if we needed to open up a day or two here and there, we'd be able to. There wasn't a lot of wiggle room in the years prior to COVID. I think that's the only, and the waste management line, that line is for porta potties that are placed all around the parks. If we end up having to have the porta potties out all year, like we had during COVID in multiple parks, the cost will be a lot higher than the $2,100. So that's why that's in there.
Questions? Thank you, Sean. So indulge me, please. I'd like to finish the operating budget with debt service, retirement, and insurance before we go to wastewater and capital, just to clean up. If no one objects to that, we didn't get to that last night. I think it's just a little cleaner. I'm not hearing anyone object. So page 28, debt service. And while we're getting ready, for anyone who's new, we usually try to keep these meetings to about 2 hours. So we're moving it along well tonight. Who's on debt service?
I am, Steve.
Good.
Oh, nice microphone tonight.
I stole my one from work and brought it home.
Good job.
Just bear with me 1 minute. I was trying to get my notes up on.
Sorry, I may have taken Sue by surprise. I didn't tell her ahead of time.
You did, and I have to apologize. I had also let Alicia know that I would let her know when we were getting close to debt, thinking that it was coming after capital. So I just notified her if she's able to jump on.
Okay, I apologize.
That's okay. So as everyone is aware, this is a fixed cost for the town. This is our long-term, well, most of the debt is made up of our long-term bonds, which was in tab 4, detailed of all the existing bonds and our outstanding debt. The overall budget is 11.4% increase. That is actually down from last year's budget, which was a 15% increase. I know that's not a lot of consolation, but some of that is due to the fact that we took advantage of bonding twice in the past calendar year, taking advantage of the low interest rates. So that has kept our payments in decent dollar amounts. So the increase to the long-term principal was $209,000, and the long-term interest was roughly a $30,000 increase, for a total of our long-term debt obligation of $238,000. That's comparable to last year's increase. Well, it's not comparable. Last year's increase was $450,000, just to give you perspective on that. The third line, short-term interest, is for when we take out a short-term note, otherwise called a bond anticipation note. That is for the interest only. We are planning in the spring to do a short-term note of approximately $3 million, of which the interest would come due in fiscal 23. It's typically a 1-year note, and the interest comes due at that point. Later down the road, we would certainly be permanently financing that, and that would then impact the long-term portion of this budget, in more than likely in fiscal 24. And the debt issuance cost line item is for basically what it says, for whenever we issue a note or a bond, there are a lot of costs associated with that, paying Standards and Poor's for the bond rating, interview, and report, paying our financial advisors and bond counsel for the legal. So there's several things involved in that. I'm happy to answer specific questions if anyone has them.
Questions, please. Go ahead, Phil.
I had a brief chat with Sue earlier today with a couple of sort of in the weeds questions, and she was very helpful. And I have full confidence in all these numbers. Just one comment I would make, and this is just my observation, is just sort of by nature of how this calculation works, and Sue's following the state law to the letter. I would just note that the $1,866,000 of principal due in the fiscal 23 budget, by nature of how the calculation works, it is excluding the principal payments on that roughly $3 million of debt that the town expects to issue in the spring. I mean, there's no shocking revelation there, but it's I would just highlight that the fact that we pretty much know that number will be increasing as a result of those issuances in the spring, and there's a million variables as to how that would work, but a kind of a crude estimate that I did in my mind is if you assume a 15-year bond and the $3 million, then that would be $200,000 per year. So again, calculation's correct, no criticism there. Just by nature of it, it is not capturing what we know is going to be issued in debt in spring of this fiscal year.
And as I explained to Phil when I met with him earlier, obviously we can only budget for the payments that are due in fiscal 23. So that, to his point, that yes, when we do bond that permanently and have a principal payment, that would be budgeted for in fiscal 24. So I cannot include that in this year's budget.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I agree.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Ann.
Yes, this is the budget line that I get most concerned about because I think it's the easiest one to increase without being aware that we're increasing it because it's not an immediate. It comes out of the capital expenses that then feed into the debt. And I'm really, my recollection, and again, Mark, you presented at the meeting yesterday, we didn't borrow all that much last year. Sue, I do recall you and Mark came to the finance committee and talked about that we had been able to issue some bonds to keep our costs, our expenses for debt payments down. And yet, and right, it was 15% last year. It's only 11% this year. And we all know that interest rates are going up and, we're making use of the lowest interest rates we can now. I guess and this is such a sizable portion of our budget. This was some counting up or some calculations I did. And of this about, 710,000, that is the total town budget, not including school assessment, and not including, and I did pull out wastewater because that's a revolving fund, but this is about a third of our budget. This is a huge amount, and I just worry that we're just going to keep incurring more debt, and it's easy to do because it's not an immediate expense. So I guess I just want to say that, particularly as we go into looking at the capital budget.
Thanks, Sam. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no one, page 29, retirement.
So this is pretty, I'm going to, I think Alicia was lined up to do this one, but instead of promoting her, I can probably take this if it's easier.
We can promote her too if she's on the line and you'd like to.
She is on the line and promoted. She's been here.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Great.
here.
Go right ahead, Alicia.
Yeah, so, excuse me, I'm sorry. So retirement is actually not really a number that we can adjust other than what we get for our portion of retirement from Berkshire County Retirement. And then I included, I accounted for the employees that do get some retirement through the town for their increases. Other than that, there's not really much wiggle room when we have retirement telling us what our annual assessment is.
Any questions? Thank you, Alicia.
You're welcome.
Last is page 30, insurance.
So I think this is going to be a team effort. Alicia and I can speak to the health insurance. The other insurances are covered by Amy. I also can cover the allocation from wastewater. So as you can see, in regard to health insurance, this was a tough budget this year. As many of you know, we have level funded this budget for the last few years. We built in approximately a 4% increase prior to hearing from Berkshire Health Group of their rate increases. The 4% increase amounts to approximately $67,000, which is actually the contingency we try to usually build in for taking on new new hires, family plan. We've also been, and I think Alicia could speak more to this, we've had some people transition to our plan that were on their spouse's plan due to the change at Berkshire Health Systems of no longer covering spouses. So I have to be completely honest, when we first prepared this budget, I felt a 4% was a decent increase, but with the given factors over the past week, I really feel that that's going to be a tight budget. As everyone knows, we also utilize that as a way to generate free cash, but having level funded it for the last several years, we're getting tighter and tighter with what does spin off from that line. And honestly, I truly believe another 10 to 20,000 in that line would be helpful.
So. I agree with Sue on that. I also in the past few weeks have had two different employees come to me and ask me when they can get on our plan. And so I told them July 1st, because that's when, open enrollment would have them effective for July 1st. So I think we budgeted for like 3 extra people at the family plan, but there's 2 of them right there that will be joining on July 1st.
So do you have more?
No, as I said, I really could only speak to the health insurance, and the allocation for the wastewater department. I'm happy to speak to that now, unless you want to talk on health insurance.
Let's talk about the entire budget like we have, so you can talk about the allocation for wastewater.
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar, what this is that because the wastewater is an enterprise fund, there are many costs that are related in the jobs that many of us perform on the general fund side. So the DPW director, a portion of his salary is devoted to working on enterprise. A portion of my job is, on wastewater. Same with the treasurer collector. So this basically is the indirect costs of running the wastewater from the general fund side. So the wastewater enterprise fund has to reimburse the general fund for those indirect costs. I have a list of, and I may or may not have that with you, which I do. It's mostly made up of staff's salaries related. It's also an allocation of the gas and diesel, and then any various supplies. And based on, with the 2% cost of living increase and some mid-year salary adjustments, the total came to $196,926. I rounded up to 200,000.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. You will see the offset to that in the wastewater. It will be budgeted as a line item in the wastewater's budget.
Great. Phil, go ahead.
Yes, looking at the health and life line, how much of an indicator of the actual for fiscal 22 is the actual through the end of the calendar year? So in other words, I'm looking at the 857 through the end of the calendar year relative to the full fiscal year 2021.
That is the gross total at this point, Phil. There is the wastewater enterprise fund also contributes to that line item, and that's I do that through a journal entry. I typically do that at the first 6 months point. In the second 6 months, I only do it twice a year. At the time I was preparing the budget, I did not have that journal entry done yet, so that's the gross total.
So the other part of my question is this reflecting back on maybe a comment I made last year, is that apparently this line item of 51,740 has been used as a reserve item historically. And apologies if I'm getting that terminology wrong here, but it's typically been significantly overfunded with respect to this budget number. And I'm trying to get the sense if that will still be the case for the full year 2022.
I am happy to take a closer look at that. I wouldn't be able to give you a good estimate at this point without looking at what the wastewater share is and doing that analysis. So I could, I can come back to one of the future meetings next week and give you that idea.
Well, that's fair. But did you understand did I make my question reasonably clear? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And again, Steve, I believe that you answered my question last year with respect to how this line item is typically used as a reserve.
Yes.
Can we just talk about that a little more?
Yeah. So I let Sue do it. I know the Department of Revenue has approved this, and we've been very successful in doing this, but Sue, go right ahead.
So this precedes my time. I think I had alluded to that earlier, Phil. I'm not saying that most municipalities do that. They don't usually talk about it though. So this, I believe this historically has been, the town does put a cushion in that line item so that it can generate, the funds that are surplus at the end of the year will generate free cash. And as Steve said, this has been, our auditors are well aware of it. The Department of Revenue is aware of it. We also do the same thing with the local receipts, as I explained to you earlier when we had talked. So, however, because we have been level funding it the last couple of years, that cushion is getting smaller and smaller.
Well, I certainly think reserves are a good thing. So I'm not, I have no criticism on that concept. My comment is really the same as last year, and I'm not saying we're doing anything wrong. It's just if one of our objectives is to make our budget presentation very clear and understandable to as many people as possible, then using this particular line item for a portion of our budgetary reserving, I don't think meets that threshold. I hear your point that the state is very well aware of it, and that we've been doing it for quite a while. So the odds of us changing that policy are obviously fairly remote, if not zero. But my concern is that it just adds to the I'll use the word opaqueness of some of our financial presentation, where we have this type of reserve inherent in a health and life insurance line item in the budget. But it's a good thing. I mean, a reserve is a good thing. So, no bad intent is at all considered in my comments. But it's a hidden reserve, as I use that term.
May I, Steve?
Sure, and then Ann.
Okay, I'm sorry, Ann.
That's fine.
It's not just that the DOR is aware of it; it's that it's the only place they allow it. If we could have a line that said reserved, if we made it go away, it would be a one-year adjustment in the tax rate, but then we wouldn't have that reserve. In looking at it, and a discussion we may want to have is that all of the marijuana money at this point we don't count on, so we're even more underestimating our reserve fund. So it is, and this may be an opportunity to undo that. But the reason it's there, and we have to explain it every year at town meeting when some sharp-eyed person looks and says, "Wait a minute, why are you asking for $1.5 million when you only spend $1 million?" Thanks.
Thanks. Ann, did you want to say something? Sue?
Yeah, actually, Ed, in all due respect, there is a way you can create a line item for it. At least I can speak to that from a city budget perspective, we did something similar in Pittsfield. We had a line item that was actually called contingency. However, we had a budget, like, you can't really put contingency in an insurance budget. I think that's where, being a smaller community, we would have to create a budget called miscellaneous, so to speak, and have various other things in there. That's why the line item for allocation for wastewater, I had no other budget to put that in when I first created it. I needed a large enough budget to be able to deduct it from. But you can create a line item that you would budget every year. It's called contingency, where you do have money that, you know, that you set aside for certain things. That's where we could fund the police cruisers or some of the other capital equipment out of, and also put a bit more of a reserve in. So there is a little bit of way we could change that in the future. Mark and I have talked about it a few times, of trying to establish that, you know, maybe in the next 2 budget years.
Thank you, Sue. Ann, go ahead.
Yeah, I apologize. I thought I heard us saying that we had some concern that there wasn't enough money in the budget for us to cover the expenses for all the employees who want to go on to the town's health insurance. Did I misunderstand that?
No. What I'm trying to say is, if we factor out that we set aside money in this line to generate free cash, then I would say we have had a level fund budget for the last couple of years. I built in a 4%. Alicia and I built in a 4% prior to Berkshire Health Group coming forward with their rates, and prior to Alicia, you know, knowing that there's other people that are coming on. So the 4% increase is only $67,000. I'm doing this, yes. To budget for a contingency of 3 new employees coming on at a family rate, that equals $61,000. So we're really tight there, and that's why I would like to add another 10 to 20,000 to that, if it's possible, somewhere after we get through this process, and if any of the other budgets change. Does that make sense?
I think so. So
We're eating away at the reserve, is what we're doing.
Right,
exactly.
okay.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
anyone else?
in your mind, is there a number that in your mind that is the reserve target that you're trying to achieve, and then you budget for the traditional or the expected medical insurance cost above that number?
You know, I'm never that technical with it. I look at what the rate increases are going to be, factor the contingency, you know, in working with Alicia on that. What I do look back as, and I can tell you what if you would like to know what some of the turnbacks were at the prior fiscal years, and that's how I know it's been being depleted. We used to be, there were years we were between $700,000 and $800,000. It started coming down under 600,000. Then we were to $500,000, and fiscal 20 was at 420,000. Last year it went up a little bit, but I do believe that was because we had a premium holiday and didn't have any health insurance for 1 month of the health insurance payment for 1 month of the year. So I realize those sound like big numbers, and I understand when I read those that, you know, here I am saying, hey, I want another 10 or 20, but understand it used to be an $800,000 reserve.
Now, last question on this, and
sure,
it is, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, maybe you'll have to check on this, but when we make our presentations and provide information to the rating agencies to talk about the our secure finances as a town to keep our high credit rating, does this reserve get reflected in that type of discussion?
They do look at budgets to actuals. They ask, you know, how we did in the budget year. They know what the surplus is at the end of the year, the turnbacks as we refer to them. They look at your free cash. They look at all of your reserves. So, you know, do they specifically know we put extra money in health insurance? No, but we provide them with the budget report when they've requested it. There's, you know, there's a lot of work that goes into the rating call. So they have full disclosure to all their financials.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I would probably bet 5 cents that we're probably not getting the full benefit of that in those discussions. But again, it all has gone very successfully. So I'm not going to.
Yeah, the town has the top. You know, we have the highest bond rating, so
Sure,
it's
absolutely.
It's hurting us.
Well, I would just propose that. I appreciate this is not something that is going to be changed anytime soon. I would just propose that to the extent that Mark and Sue have had some conversations about potentially pursuing an alternative way of doing this within state law, then I would just encourage them to continue that conversation, and maybe we can revisit it at some point in the future.
Thank you, Phil. Anyone else? Okay, so we got through last night's agenda. So let's turn to H31 and wastewater.
Hello again. So the wastewater scene increases pretty much across the board to deal with inflation and increased costs like all the rest of the budgets I have. We can call it electricity increases first, and I just want to back up and let everyone get an idea of perspective on why there's so much budgeted despite the last year's actuals. The aeration tanks and the clarifiers down there are incredibly huge pieces of equipment that take up a lot of electricity, as you can imagine. You can have massive fluctuations in the amount of electricity used based simply upon if you have a lot of rain one year versus a different year. So if we end up having a lot of rain this spring, and we certainly did late last summer and fall, you could have a massive increase in electrical cost. So that's reflected there. Gas and oil, another moderate increase to try to keep up with the cost of increases. I believe that is used primarily to fill the generators. Water, so even though we only used 1,500 last year, occasionally we'll need to flood the aeration tanks with water, and it's quite expensive. Repairs and maintenance, continue to see the increases in cost, and we are also unfortunately losing our Assistant Superintendent of Public Works, Bill Ingram, to retirement, and he has been doing a lot of work himself on these pieces of machines, the pumps and whatnot, and we can expect to see some increased cost as a result of losing him. He's been there 40 years almost. Uniform rentals, I think this is contractual across the board. All departments were having to pay more for uniforms. Other increases, contracted services, similar things, having people to come work on pumps, work on specialized computer systems within pump stations in the plant. The collection system, these are increases that are required for us to do per our DEP and EPA permit to deal with inflow and infiltration. We have to be monitoring the collection system. We have to be shown doing repairs, and then we have to be shown we're doing planning, and then we have to submit that information to DEP every year. Part of the cost for engineering and architecture is to help us with the reporting DEP and EPA. That's the next line item down below. There's multiple permits that we need to adhere to and report to DEP, EPA, and other various agencies related to phosphorus, nitrogen, and also the cleanliness of the effluent wastewater once it's processed. Vehicular supplies gone up a little bit just to keep up with the cost of inflation, as well as gasoline. You'll also see an increase in chemicals. We have gone out to bid, and the cost of the chemicals has gone up. There also is massive amount of fluctuations in terms of the chemicals we utilize at the plant based upon, as I had said before, the weather conditions. If we get a lot of rain, inevitably that rainwater ends up at the plant and increases the cost of electricity, but also increases our usage of chemicals to stay within our permit with EPA and DEP for our effluent. I think that's the big items that are going up. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Questions, please. Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Steve. Hey, Sean, I noticed in, that the, enterprise fund has almost 5.7 million in free cash. What are the plans for that? I mean, can any of it be used to offset or lower some of this increase? Or is it earmarked for,
So I think you've been hearing me like a broken record say pump stations. We just actually got approval. I think it was last week from the Conscom to move forward with replacing 2 pump stations. We actually need to replace 4, but we hit a snag with the compensatory storage issue with one of the permits at 2 of the pump stations. So we're moving forward with 2 pump stations to do immediately, with plans to upgrade the other 2 in a different manner. That cost will be probably $4 million, and we have to replace an aeration tank to the tune of probably $10 million, maybe a little more. That engineering has started, and we'll be seeking funding probably next year. We also have a few $1 million in pipe replacement that we have identified through our I&I study that we'll also be seeking approval for next year. The hill in particular has some really bad infiltration in old clay pipes, to the extent that we have gravel running down the hill in the sewer lines all the way into plant. So we did avoid the major $25 to $30 million upgrade if through DEP for our phosphorus permit, which is great news. But we do need to pivot to replacing the aeration tank and the lines and the pump station. So we still have some significant cost on the horizon.
You sure do. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Just an oddity. Just looking at my favorite topic, the health and life insurance, and I just noticed it was a significant bump in fiscal 21 to 22. I'm just wondering if you could describe what went on there.
I don't know if I would have the answer off the top of my head. It's not exactly my purview. My guess is that there was additional employees, but I don't know if Sue would have that information available.
We'll bring that back at another meeting.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, the last item on tonight's agenda, and we have a half hour, so this will work out well. Capital. Starts in tab 7 and goes to tab 8, I believe.
So I think this is me. I would like to pull this line, Steve. And I want to preface that we just got a whole bunch of, I asked for quotes when the budget process started from multiple vendors for the trucks and for the mower we're about to see. And unfortunately, we could not get them in a timely fashion. And we had to utilize old quotes that we had and then ask them if the price would hold, because the vendors have been uncooperative. In the case of the first quote, I spoke to the highway superintendent a minute ago, and this truck is not going to be replaced until next year. So I would like to pull the $350 from the capital request.
So I may be a little lost where you are. So
all I could see was the screen. So
that's okay.
I should go to which tab should I go to, and where in that tab?
It was sorry, but
tab 7, Ann.
Yeah, why don't you start on 7? I think you let Sean jump the gun a little bit, but we'll walk it back slightly and then let Sean.
Okay, I just found it.
I couldn't stop.
I just found it. Okay.
Yeah, you know when to just get out of the way. That's
right.
Okay, here we go. Got it. All right.
So,
my bad.
This is Chris. I'll give a quick overview here. Thanks, Ann, and Sue and Sean and Chief Storty's on the line. Please jump in to fill in the details. What we do every year is look at our fleet schedule, look at our road and stormwater schedule, look at our town buildings and all the equipment that we'll need. We try to get quotes, which Sean alluded to. We try to get quotes if we can for equipment that's coming due, for vehicles and motor pool that's coming due, for special projects, for roads that need to be done, for cruisers that need to be purchased, etc. So we try to build that into the budget. So what you see under this FY23 capital request, the column that reads total amount, I'll just put your eyes on that column first. The PD has a total of 173,000 in requests. There's 2 police cruisers in there. They have surveillance cameras, which Paul, I think they're for in the station, if I'm not mistaken, and 6 body cams.
Yeah, it's. I'm trying to get some clarification. So the surveillance cameras are for in station to upgrade our camera system within in-house. The body cams is a separate project that we got the grant for, and the 40,000 is the balance of that grant, which would cover the cost for running that program for 5 years. I can speak more on it if you have any additional questions.
Should we stop there, Steve? And
yeah, let's talk about that first, and let's talk about the funding source too, just to complete that. The first 2 are free cash, fairly simple. The last one, the 2 cruisers, which we know are part of the replacement plan, is tax levy.
What I'm not seeing, and I'm not sure why, was the 2 radios for the cruisers.
They're built into that total.
Oh, okay, that's what was confusing me. All right, thank you.
And you'll explain tax levy, Sue? Or Chris?
Yeah, the tax levy is the property taxes. It's part of in page 2, the budget projection overview.
Yeah.
It's estimated to be a raise and appropriate.
Okay,
so the theory there, and Sue, correct me if I'm wrong, is that cruisers last 2 years, 3 years if we're lucky, and to borrow long term seems inappropriate for something that gets burned through so quickly. And so that's why we've made the decision this year, and I think last year too, to put those on the tax levy.
So just so I'm clear, sorry, Tom, I'll let you go next. Just so I'm clear.
You know what I'm going to ask.
So yes, I do, but maybe it's because it's late or I'm old. One of the reasons this could just as well fit into the operating budget, correct?
Yes, Steve. That's kind of what I was when I alluded to with Ed about a way to build a contingency line item. That's really where you could put that, and that's one of my goals to get to that in the budget process is absolutely create a line item that's for capital expenditures every year, and then we appropriate that money. We take a handful of the equipment that we can afford in the operating budget.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was. Okay, Tom, go right ahead. I won't steal your thunder.
Oh, you could. Chief, on the 2 police cruisers, I always ask, are there any hybrid cruisers that you guys would look at? Or
no, I have done some research on them just recently, actually. And currently there's a Tesla makes a model, and currently there's nothing that's, aside from like a parking enforcement car like New York City uses, that is been tested and found to be reliable.
Okay. All right, well, thanks.
Maybe in the near future.
So, thank you.
Yep.
Other questions about just the police request? So let's move on to the DPW then.
The Public Works request, and I'll let Sean jump in here. The line under vehicles and equipment is 0 on your spreadsheet. The reason being is while we had equipment scheduled for FY23 replacement, we weren't able to get the quotes in time for this budget book. We fully anticipated addressing this equipment, specifically Highway Truck 4, which is a heavy truck, 550, an F550, and the roadside mower equipment. So they're on the schedule. We just didn't have the quotes. Sean does have the quotes, and that's what he was jumping in to do. So I'll let Sean go ahead and discuss the equipment. And if you want to see it, we can put it on screen as well.
Thanks, Chris.
So, can I just clarify? So we're talking about something that's not on this screen?
Correct. We're going to add two things. One is a roadside guardrail mower for $51,128. And truck M4 is a F550 with a full plowing package and sanding package for $100,900. So those two total $152,028. Sean?
Yeah, you covered it all. The highway truck is used for plowing by the highway department. Obviously, it's not the huge trucks you see, but it's a substantial size one. Has an all-season body, and also is utilized in day-to-day operation during the summertime, so it is used all the time. This is again part of the replacement schedule, which has been successful to try to avoid substantial costs for repairs and to keep the fleet in good working order, so that we're able to respond to winter storms in timely fashion. This particular truck has some serious issues at the front end, which we're hoping to get through this winter without having to replace, but the cost is substantial to do the work on it. And most trucks at this age that have seen the kind of treated salt over their life tend to start rotting apart, including the frame. And that is the case with this truck as well. I also just want to caution that we're at the point now with the trucks that when we order them in July, it can be a year to a year and a half before they arrive. Unfortunately, we just had this happen with a truck at the wastewater plant. I believe it was a year ago, so more than a year and a half when we ordered it. So that's the truck. The other piece of equipment we're asking for is a guardrail mower, and there's two mowers we utilize for summertime road mowing. One is the substantial flail mower you see on the John Deere tractor going all around. It's a big machine. The second was a guardrail mower that attaches to the sidewalk plow. The sidewalk plow had the small guardrail mower on it, and unfortunately, this sidewalk guardrail mower broke and is no longer being manufactured, and it is no longer we're no longer can get parts for it to fix it. So we need to replace that guardrail mower with a new mower that can attach to the John Deere tractor, and that is what is being proposed.
So before we move on, we'll go in each category. So next we'll go buildings and grounds, and go street and bridge. So questions on vehicles and equipment. So buildings and grounds next.
I'll go ahead and introduce it, and Sean can jump in. There's two requests here. I should say the vehicles that we just discussed, haven't chatted with Sue in detail, but I would assume they would be borrowed for, as we do with most of our vehicles that have a 8 to 10 year life generally. So buildings and grounds, the first one there is for Ramsdale Library, $350,000 request towards making the front entrance ADA compliant. Now, there were funds previously voted, I want to say in FY18, for about this amount. We've utilized a substantial amount of those funds to do engineering for construction of an ADA ramp and access into the library. We anticipate we'll need what's left there plus this for the actual construction. The good news is Amanda DeGeorge's had a CPA grant to do some archaeological study on the front lawn there at Ramsdale, and they found no issues archaeological wise that would impinge on a construction project there, so that's good. But yeah, that's a substantial project, but as you all know right now, you can't get to the front door or into the library if you're mobility impaired or in a wheelchair. The second one there is proposed redesign of the town hall building campus. That includes the front driveway, lawn area, the side, the Castle Street side sidewalks, as well as the parking lot all the way around the building. It would include lighting of the parking lot. It would include, at that time, we would put the sewer line in for the proposed bathroom that was approved last year. The goals here, which have been talked about since at least 2010-ish, when we did the Main Street project, were to redesign that front driveway for pedestrian and vehicular safety, i.e. to eliminate the first driveway off of Castle Street and make it exclusively a pedestrian zone. It would also highlight the War Memorial monuments and the Wing Victory monuments. Initial designs we did with Walt Kunahovsky back in 2010. We had some additional designs done in concert with the input of the Historic District Commission a couple years ago, and we've been discussing these improvements with that board for a little while now. So we think as a package to redo the parking lot, to pave it, to add the needed lights, to make all of the sidewalks ADA accessible. We think it would be a really good project. Also, the other day I did apply for, filed a pre-grant application with the state to help with this total. So two, what we think are really important projects for the town. Happy to discuss.
Questions on those two projects? Okay, let's move ahead to street and bridge improvements.
Street and bridge improvements, 3.4 million this year. Kind of a low year, actually. You'll see some of the out years are much, much higher. It includes 300,000, which we use for all of our design and engineering, and we can also pivot that to other areas of engineering if we need to. Sidewalk improvements include things like repairing the sidewalks, particularly those that go to critical facilities like the hospital or major employers like the hospital, and completing the sidewalk networks in places like West Avenue, Silver Street, South Main, if we get to it. These programs are often eligible for Complete Streets grants, which we will pursue. Bridge engineering is a separate category there. And Sean, I believe that will go towards Brookside Road.
So we have money for Brookside Road already, I believe, but we have about 4 other bridges that are going to need to have some initial bridge construction engineering done, including the wooden bridge by the airport and some repairs made to the smaller bridges around town. So I think we'll be utilizing it sort of as a catch-all for those smaller bridges.
Thanks. The Castle Street pedestrian tunnel, that's proposed to be funded out of CPA. This is design only, design and engineering only. The CPC did recommend full funding for that, so that should be out of the CPA account at town meeting. Senior Center parking lot needs to be completely rebuilt. Drainage, it's been neglected for a number of years now. I don't know if Polly's on the line, but thank goodness she hasn't twisted her ankle yet. The street improvements include, I need to reference the list here, Sean, and you can.
So I think 900,000 of that. 900,000 of that is for the Berkshire Heights area, Haley Road, that whole area. It also includes substantial amounts of money to do the improvements to the, not substantial amounts of money, but a pretty high amount of money to do crosswalk improvements, pedestrian improvements in Main Street, as well as dealing with some of the tripping hazards. It has a line for doing replacement of some guardrails as well as crack sealing, which we are a bit behind on, but having done all this major work on these roads the last 5 years, the next step in a proper pavement management plan is to do preventative maintenance on them, which includes crack sealing.
I believe it includes money towards repaving or at least overlaying some of the roads in the cemeteries as sort of year one of a 10-year cemetery road plan.
And $100,000 dedicated. I don't know if it'll be over in 10 years, but we're asking for $100,000 as a standalone sort of indefinitely. We have miles and miles of asphalt roads in the cemeteries, and we put no money into them, and they're in disrepair. We need to start excavating out some of the redundant roads we don't need, and reclaiming them as actually lots for grave sites, but also to crack seal as much as we can, and oil and stone as much as we can the roads. The cemetery, if anyone's walked the cemetery roads, that they can see what kind of condition they're in.
I'm happy to say that one thing we were able to pull out of the street improvements list this year was, I think it was nearly $1 million we had pre-programmed last year for Route 71, Agamemnon Plain Road. The state's coming in. You saw an announcement about that a few months ago that the state will contribute in to the cost. They'll cover the cost of Agamemnon Plain Road.
Okay, so buildings and grounds, Garfield?
I think we covered that. Are we on to street and bridge, Steve?
Yeah, Garfield had a question though.
Oh, okay. You're muted, Garfield.
I'm not sure if we're high, Garfield. We're speaking to the Rotary. Is there any talk about of it? And I also wanted to know about the side. There's some sidewalks that out in front of my home actually that were made ADA. They took some bushes from my home, but there's cracks in these. Now, I understand some of it because we have to, as a town, take the lowest bid, and we're always going to get great work. But are these going to be repaired? And with the thought of it being ADA ready, and also, and I'm not sure if this is the correct spot to ask, or if I'm correct in asking, but there's some work being done down the road. They're putting in a pool, and the sidewalk is in pretty good disrepair from them driving over it with their heavy equipment. Who's responsible for fixing that?
Yeah, those contractors will be held responsible for fixing that sidewalk, Garfield. Other sidewalk improvements can be done through the street repairs budget that Sean discussed earlier. All the sidewalks we install are ADA compliant, unless, of course, the road itself is very steep. Then we just follow the pitch of the road, of course. The Rotary is funded primarily through Mass DOT. There were some aspects of that, town utilities underneath the Rotary, that we covered, and I believe those were funded by an appropriation last year. So there's the town's cost there are, that was all Mass DOT. We have no ongoing cost there.
Thank you.
Bill, go right ahead.
Under street improvements, am I reading it right that the 406,000 is funded by the state?
Yes, that's correct. That's the Chapter 90 allocation money we received.
Correct.
And is that a you know, it seems like it's roughly a quarter of that number. Is that a standard, or is that high, or is that low?
That's a standard. They use a formula that's based on population and employment for every municipality in the state, and that's our allocation currently.
Very similar to the state aid, Phil.
Yep.
Population, road miles, and employment, I think, are the factors.
Yes, thank you.
Lee, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just looking for the historical trends on what we've borrowed in the past for capital requests, and I can't seem to find that. I was just wondering, is there anything that shows in years past how this compares to? I know we go forward, but I'm just wondering backwards. Is there anything that we can compare to how this fits in?
Lee, that was in Mark's presentation last night. If he's able to pull it up, that would be the.
I can give it a try. I did post it on the website today also,
and then Sue has a spreadsheet in there that shows previous borrowing, I believe, right, Sue?
Yeah, I think if I understood what Lee was looking for, she's looking for what do we approve every year for capital requests, I think. So that's not going to really help. Mark's one of Mark's slides addresses that.
So it's not the book, it's in the slide. Oh,
This is amounts, but not, this is the amounts, but I don't think it's what.
It's the, okay, that's the amounts, but that's not the borrowing, okay.
And it's not necessarily just streets.
Correct.
Okay.
It's totally.
I'm just trying to compare apples to apples.
Yeah, the streets are driven, you know, obviously the bridges drive that cost sometimes too, but the streets, what Sean and his team does is they'll try to take neighborhoods if they can, that are in disrepair, that need improvements, and they'll try to group them for efficiency's sake. So this coming year, it'll be the Berkshire Heights area. And it's also done in coordination with like the fire district, the wastewater, with Berkshire Gas. So if they're doing water mains one year, then we'll come in like a year or two afterwards to do the street. So the cycles are all kind of intertwined, and they don't always equal like $2 million a year or $3 million a year. It depends on the scope of the projects that we think we can do.
It's also a little more complicated than it was even 3-4 years ago. The average price per ton of asphalt, as I mentioned prior, was like $55 or $60 a ton. That's almost tripled on some of our projects. So we're getting less done while spending double, if that makes sense.
Sorry, a question is, did I hear it right that you're considering or planning on paving the entirety of Haley Road, including the significant portion that is unpaved, or it's basically airport mix?
That unpaved section of road is not going to be paved. I believe that section is private. The rest of that area is going to be fully reclaimed. It's not just a paving, it's a full reconstruction essentially. That road hasn't been paved since the 80s, I think, when it was first adopted by the town. So we're a little delayed getting there.
That area includes, so that portion of Haley Road, Berkshire Heights, Pleasant View, Barrington Place, all of the roads kind of in that area will be done under this plan.
Does that include the area right, basically next to the entrance to McAllister Park and the nature walk there?
I believe that's part of the dirt portion. So the answer would be no.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Let's move on to parks.
I'll let Sean talk about the miscellaneous park improvements and equipment line, which is slated for $50,000. But I'll touch on the Memorial Field one, which is a total of $500,000. Under tab 7, that spreadsheet lists the proposal for $500,000 to be $250 from town borrowing and $250 from CPA. But I am happy to tell you that the CPC last week or the week before is recommending that the entire $500,000 be bonded through the CPA, so that would not come under the town's general fund bonding. Sean, do you want to touch on the various parks improvements equipment?
So the parks improvements line, it's a standard line that we'd be requesting every year. I believe it's a special article. It's just to do basic maintenance in the parks. Really, we'd be able to cover the cost of the mulch, maybe some clay for the infields. And those numbers alone can add up to $10,000 or $15,000. A little bit extra money we have might be used to fix a fence or do some other improvements. There are some sizable capital projects the Parks Department is tackling this year, including work to the softball fields and a new bathroom down there.
Any question under parks?
I have one, Steve, and
of
I
course,
just, Chris, can you just explain the difference that makes as far as the tax levy goes, as far as the CPA taking on the full 500,000 as opposed to it being 50-50? I'm not, that kind of went over my head a little bit there.
Well, that column for borrowing,
yeah,
under Memorial Field, so that'll be 0.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, as far as so the CPA is gonna borrow that money, is what you're saying.
Right. So the CPA collects funds every year anyway, through both the state match and the property tax bill surcharge. The CPC is recommending that those funds that it is raising anyway, it's not going to have to raise the CPA surcharge. It's already coming in at existing levels, that those funds be used for the term of the bond to pay it off. I think it would be a 15-year bond. And it's so it comes out to something like, I believe it was about $35,000 a year for 15 years of CPA funds.
And I can help clarify a little bit as well. What it actually would, it still would be part of the borrowing column. It would be similar to, I keep trying to scroll this, forget that I'm in control of this. It would be similar to the wastewater, where that's got its own portion, because the wastewater budget would be paying for the borrowing.
Oh, okay. So you're going to put it all in the borrow. Okay, yeah.
Oh, yes. Sense. Yes, we borrowed out, so we still are borrowing it, but the debt payment would be shown. Chris would be covering that, and the CPA fund would be covering that. You won't see that in the operating budget.
And that also is probably correct, if I have it right, that hypothetically, if the CPA went belly up and couldn't make those payments, it would be the town's responsibility, right?
No, the CPA, first of all, won't go belly up because it's a tax surcharge. And even if CPA was revoked, we would still have to raise those funds through a small CPA just to pay that obligation.
Okay. Ann, go ahead.
Yeah. Did I hear you correctly to say that every year we set aside 50,000 in the capital budget for park improvement and equipment?
Between 40 and 50,000 has been the standard.
So, so would it make more sense? And I'm not saying this has to be for this year, but wouldn't it make sense to put that in the operating budget then? I mean, if this is a anticipated expense every year, and we just keep adding to our debt, if we keep adding another $50,000 every year.
I think that's a special article. Historically, I think it's been in operating once or twice, and maybe Sue could jump in. I don't know that we borrow for that capital.
It's in the borrowing column, Sean.
Oh, sorry about that. So last year we didn't borrow for it. I guess this year we're asking to borrow for it. So
I'll try to clarify. Prior to my time, my understanding was there were special articles in the past just appropriating that money. We changed this a few years ago that it's a borrowing. So it's been a borrowing at least, I would say, 4 years in a row now. I would have to look back at historical on my side of that, but I believe it's been 4 years in the budget now, in the capital budget.
So one of the things that I'll just say is that I'm on the parks, and a piece of equipment, say a swing or anything like that, it's like $20,000, and it has a fairly long shelf life. So it's not totally inappropriate to be borrowing for that.
Nope, I didn't say it was.
No, I didn't say you said it was. I was more saying that it some of Sean's examples like mulch and other things may have sounded like it was stuff that's just reoccurring expenses, but there are other things that we use it for that are qualified for borrowing very easily.
Yeah, the equipment out back here at Town Hall was like Steve said, $20,000. There was mulch in it too, but it was the fence and the one piece of equipment, one slide. It's a staggering amount of money.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
For those of us who had kids that had a slide in our backyard for $200, forget it. It's like $20,000 for these slides. Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, back to the street improvements. I mean, I share some others' concern about the total amount of the borrowing. Do we have what criteria are we using when we decide how much we need to spend on the sidewalk improvements and street improvements? I mean, if we're concerned about these dollar amounts, I mean that's the whopper number on the page. It's $2.5 million. So let me let you speak, but are these optional improvements, or are they urgent improvements?
I would like to. Sorry.
No, go ahead, Sean.
I would just, from my perspective, of course, for instance, this year, we could double that number of paving and I still wouldn't be able to catch up with all the need we have. So there's always a balance struck between what kind of work is essential that has to get done and what I would like to get done. But that road up there, as I stated, it's been 40 years since it's been paved. There's nothing left to it. And we are paying an immense amount of money in salt to keep the road open during the winter. And also everyone's paying a price in terms of the wear and tear in their cars. So we do have a pavement management plan and we do try to stick to it. It's sort of a recurring 20-year plan, but that is variable because of, as I mentioned, the price of asphalt at $50 a ton is triple. So even if we double what we spent 5 years ago, we're still getting less done than we were before. So, and we are behind. And I think not in a dire way, we're better than some towns, but we do have a significant need to hit these roads that have been let alone for 40 or more years. An average road lasts 18 to 20.
From the select board's point of view, I guess I've been on the longest. From previously, we were falling farther and farther behind every year. So it was when Sean came in and we decided we needed to bite the bullet. We're still falling behind, but not as far. We have 90 miles worth of roads?
80, yeah.
Yeah, and every year we would fall behind so that it was just stretching out doing the road. So we're trying to keep up with it the best we can. You're right, Phil. It's a horrible amount of money, but falling behind, we finally at least are seeing some catch up. We're not nearly there, but when I first came on, we were not even close. It's a major problem.
What the past practice was just using essentially that Chapter 90 allocation that you saw there, Phil, every year, which used to be a little bit higher, and they would just sort of stretch that as far as they could go. Sometimes it was just some pothole filling and maybe just a thin overlay of asphalt. And Sean could talk more about this, but there's different ways to fix the road. Sometimes it's an overlay of asphalt, sometimes it's a milling, and sometimes it's a reconstruction. And depending on what you do, it'll last 10 years, 20 years, or more. But we're, as Steve alluded to, we're sort of beyond that point now, where so many roads were just given the barest of maintenance. Some of these, particularly up there in the Berkshire Heights area, are just totally unraveling. And need a significant amount of attention. So in terms of sidewalks, as I said, we do try to make connections in the sidewalk network. We're trying to implement aspects of the Complete Streets plan that we did in 2018 and respect the goal of the master plan, which is to spend a certain amount of our street and road money on bike and pedestrian facilities as much as we can in a targeted way. So that's how we determine where we're focusing the funds for streets and sidewalks. I hope that answers some of your questions.
Ann, go ahead.
Thanks. I think I know the answer to this, but I assume I'm going to hear this question from other people when we go to present this budget. We can't use any of the infrastructure funds that are available to us to offset some of these expenses?
Generally, that's correct. Yes, they could be used for sewer, stormwater, and water. So if there's a stormwater project associated with one of these roads, theoretically those expenses could be covered, but just for road repaving, no.
Okay.
Lee?
Thank you. I guess this is a question for Sean, who probably would know this better than I would. With the cost, the historic costs of construction, materials and labor, would it behoove us to delay this until prices come down rather than, attack this when it's a historic high for everything? Or do we just think this is the way it's going to be from now on and it'll never come down?
So two things. The short is it's going to be this way for a while. Even if the prices of oil come down and the price of asphalt comes down, the price of labor and skilled labor is going to go up. And the longer we push off the maintenance of these roads, the more expensive they get to repair. In the case of the Berkshire Heights area, it's a prime example. If the road had been mill and filled within the first 20 years of its life, it would have cost a quarter of what it's going to cost now. So when we defer maintenance, the construction costs double or triple from the methodology of construction that needs to be utilized in order to fix the road. Same with the senior center. That project should be a quarter of what it is, and now we're going to be at the point of full reconstruction. So I think that we've kicked the can down the road as long as is foreseeable, and we've also utilized improper construction methodology to try to please everyone historically by just painting the road black with blacktop in a very small amount, trying to make it look good, but that doesn't give it longevity, and the next generation pays the cost for it.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I'm not in favor of kicking it down the road. It's just, since this is kind of historic time that we are seeing, prices just go through the roof, and we have seen them starting to come down, and I'm not advocating for this, but if we were to delay it, let's say a year until things just get a bit more settled, would that be something that we would consider? So it's a question, not advocating for it. So
there is one thing we do, or I try to do, when we go out for these large projects, if we can, it's nice to give the contractor a full year to complete the project, so they can utilize us as their base of operations and then fill in the other towns with higher prices. Also, if the price of oil comes down in the middle of the contract significantly, the town actually gets reimbursed a certain percentage of the money from the bid. So if we do see drastic prices in oil drop, we'll obviously do better. In the same token, if the price of oil goes up, the contractor is entitled to more money. So it is a gamble, but I think we need to move forward.
And I may have answered your question too quickly. So the ARPA funds, the federal stimulus funds that are coming in now that total $2 million, I was correct in the way I answered that it's eligible for stormwater, but not for paving. We're hopeful that the state will allocate a significant amount of stimulus funds of the infrastructure bill funds towards roads, towards supplemental Chapter 90 allocations to towns. So it would be wonderful if they did that. They've done that in the past, where you get extra funds in the course of the year that are unexpected, and we'll put those to good work, and maybe we wouldn't have to borrow, or maybe we can add that next street to that neighborhood that we had to say no to in the original estimate. So we're hopeful that we can get more funds and use them wisely.
I'm counting on it.
We all are.
I know.
Let's move to wastewater, which is the last one under capital.
Hold, give me 1 second.
So the primary clarifier equipment replacement, there are significant internal mechanisms that need to be replaced. And we've quoted out the numbers in order to keep it running, and that is roughly what's going to cost. It is an integral part of the plant, and we've let it go as long as we can. The pickup truck, you can see in the printout, it's due for replacement, and it is a service truck. I think it has a box, and it'll have a crane on it as well. The high pressure sewer jetter, this is the machine that's used when there's a plugged sewer line come in front of your house. Staff will come in and jet it out. It's an expensive piece of equipment, but it's an important one, especially if you happen to have the unfortunate time of having your sewer line plugged out in front of our main. I know that Steve Bannon has. Sorry about that. So the engineering line for $100,000. This is similar to what we're doing in the highway and building side with engineering. We'd like to have this as a standalone line because occasionally grant funding comes up, and we'd like to be able to use that engineering for a variety of projects, whether it's to try to get a grant or to utilize it for maybe a small sewer main replacement project as they come up. And the high pressure sewer cleaner, that's I think essentially the same thing as the jetter. It's another piece of it. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Any questions on the wastewater? Okay, we made it through, and we finished yesterday and today. Citizens speak. Media time. Thank you, everyone. By unanimous consent, we are adjourned. Excellent meeting.
Good
Thank you
job.
all.
Have a nice night, everyone.
Uh,